Listen, I'm going to be real with you. If you came here for fancy edits and flashy effects, this isn't that kind of channel. But if you want psychology knowledge that almost nobody talks about, the kind of insights that can actually change how you think and live, then you're in the right place. You just found a channel that'll give you real value, straight up. Mark my words, this will help you. What if I told you that stupidity isn't simply the absence of intelligence, but a force in itself? A hidden current that pulls even the brightest minds away from reason and into chaos. What if the true danger to civilization isn't malicious villains plotting in secret, but ordinary people, good people, who stop questioning, stop reflecting, and stop thinking for themselves? Picture this. A decorated doctor begins championing ideas that contradict basic medical knowledge. A respected professor suddenly advocates for destructive ideologies they once opposed. A caring parent, with the best of intentions, makes decisions that put their own children at risk. These are not monsters, they are intelligent, well-meaning people. Yet they've fallen under what the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer once described as the spell of stupidity. And here's what's terrifying. This isn't happening in some distant society or in another time. It's happening all around us today. To people we know, to people like us. What if I told you that stupidity isn't simply the absence of intelligence, but a force in itself? A hidden current that pulls even the brightest minds away from reason and into chaos. What if the true danger to civilization isn't malicious villains plotting in secret, but ordinary people, good people, who stop questioning, stop reflecting, and stop thinking for themselves? Picture this. A decorated doctor begins championing ideas that contradict basic medical knowledge. A respected professor suddenly advocates for destructive ideologies they once opposed. A caring parent, with the best of intentions, makes decisions that put their own children at risk. These are not monsters, they are intelligent, well-meaning people. Yet they've fallen under what the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer once described as the spell of stupidity. And here's what's terrifying. This isn't happening in some distant society or in another time. It's happening all around us today. To people we know, to people like us. See, stupidity is often dismissed as a lack of intelligence, a failure to understand. But Bonhoeffer argued it was far worse. A moral failing. Stupidity, in his eyes, was not an intellectual weakness. It was a surrender of autonomy. A person can be educated, even brilliant, and yet succumb to it, because stupidity is contagious. It spreads socially, reinforced by authority, by fear, by comfort. It's not that stupid people don't think, it's that they refuse to think critically when it matters most. They exchange judgment for conformity. And once this shift happens, it can be nearly impossible to bring them back. History is littered with examples. Entire nations swept up in dangerous ideologies, fueled not by psychopathic leaders alone, but by ordinary citizens who went along, who obeyed, who silenced their doubts. Take Nazi Germany, where Bonhoeffer himself witnessed this phenomenon. Millions weren't inherently evil, but they chose not to resist, not to question, not to think. That was enough. Stupidity became a force of destruction more powerful than malice. And it didn't stop there. From brutal colonial empires to authoritarian regimes, time and time again, the downfall of societies comes not just from the cruelty of the few, but from the compliance of the many. But maybe you're thinking, that was then. We're smarter now. We'd never let that happen today. Well, in 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram put that assumption to the test at Yale University. He gathered ordinary volunteers and instructed them, under the supervision of an authority figure, to deliver electric shocks to a stranger whenever they answered a question incorrectly. The shocks weren't real, but the participants didn't know that. They heard screams, cries of pain, even pleas for mercy. Yet, under pressure, 65% of them continued, believing they were administering potentially lethal shocks. These weren't sadists. They weren't uneducated. They were everyday people, teachers, clerks, engineers who allowed authority to override their moral compass. They stopped thinking for themselves. Fast forward to today. Do you really think we're immune? Look around. Social media echo chambers amplify misinformation at lightning speed. Political tribalism reduces complex issues into simple slogans. Entire groups rally around ideas not because they're true, but because they're comforting or because everyone else believes them. We see intelligent people, scientists, celebrities, even world leaders spreading ideas that collapse under the slightest scrutiny. We see communities choosing loyalty over truth, ideology over evidence. And it's easy to point the finger. To say, those people are stupid. But Bonhoeffer would warn us that very act is dangerous. Because stupidity isn't out there. It's here, in us. So why is stupidity more dangerous than evil? Because evil can be confronted. Malicious intent is visible, it wears a mask of cruelty. But stupidity hides behind good intentions. It cloaks itself in kindness, in tradition, in the desire to belong. And that makes it nearly impossible to fight. As Bonhoeffer wrote, "You can reason with an evil person, but with a stupid person, logic bounces off like arrows against armor. They're not thinking independently. They've outsourced their reasoning to a crowd, a leader, a system. That's why stupidity spreads so quickly in groups. On its own, it's fragile. But when reinforced by community, it becomes nearly unbreakable. So what can we do? Are we doomed to fall under this spell ourselves? The first step is humility, recognizing that none of us are immune. Intelligence doesn't protect us. Education doesn't protect us. The moment we stop questioning, the moment we trade independent thought for blind loyalty, we become vulnerable. The second step is courage. Stupidity thrives on silence and conformity. It fears dissent. That's why even small acts of resistance, asking a question, refusing to repeat a lie, pointing out contradictions, can disrupt its hold. And finally, responsibility. It's not enough to simply avoid stupidity ourselves. We have to create cultures, families, classrooms, workplaces where independent thought is valued, where questioning is safe, where disagreement is not seen as betrayal. Bonhoeffer didn't live to see the end of the war. He was executed for resisting the Nazi regime, but his words echo across history with chilling clarity. Stupidity is more dangerous than evil, because evil is rare. But stupidity, it's everywhere, and it grows whenever we stop thinking for ourselves. So the next time you see a dangerous idea gaining traction, don't just ask, "Why are people so cruel?" Because that more than malice might be the true downfall of civilization.